Hi, and today I've got Arvind calling in from Pittsburgh in the USA. Arvind, how are you going?
Hi, and hey, thanks for having me on the podcast. Really good to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. So I've been working with Arvind for a bit of time, and we just had a quick 5-second chat beforehand around taking a service and making it really productized, but we'll get into all those great things and tips and tricks later on. But as we do on this podcast, the most important thing is really to find out what really makes an IT founder survive and thrive. And you've been running your organization for 13 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, 13 years now.
It's a long time, long time. So you've got a lot of stories to tell us. I'm really keen to unpack all that and find out all the good and the bad, because as we know, running an IT services firm or a software company, it's pretty difficult and there's a lot of challenges doing that. So we want to be really authentic in the session so people that are listening there can actually hear some of these tips and tricks and what did you do wrong and what did you do right.
Welcome to IT Mastermind Talks. Your access to insights and experiences from thought leaders in the IT services industry and those that support the industry. Our podcast features not only the seasoned professionals charting their start to exit journey, but also the key contributors who help ensure their success. We delve into the diverse challenges encountered within the IT services realm, encompassing both professional hurdles and personal obstacles. Join us, be part of our growing community, and engage in the conversation. Hosted by Ian Markram of Loading Growth.
Okay, but before we start, we always go back to the beginning. How were you a kid at high school, and where were you at high school?
Well, I grew up in northern part of India, Kashmir, and I was, we were a small school. We were one of 10, 20 people. It was really interesting experience, really tight group of friends.
Yep.
And played sports for most part. Cricket was our go-to sport for most part, and subsequently ended up being a reluctant engineer. I didn't want to be an engineer. I was one of those reluctant engineers. It's one of those things that if you're born in India,
Yes.
and you can either be a doctor or an engineer.
That's amazing, because every time I speak to a person, I was at a roundtable event about 2 months ago with a lady who is the speaker, and I had at the pleasure of having her at the table, and she's Indian. She says, "You're either a doctor or an engineer," and I didn't want to be an engineer, so I became a doctor. It is exactly that. So it's amazing, that the talent that you get out of India around IT people is phenomenal. And I just never hear of any doctors. Obviously, I'm in IT, so I never hear about doctors. But I never hear about doctors or engineers. I just hear about IT people. So they all obviously become a doctor and then end up being IT, or an engineer and then become an IT. So yeah, anyway, so that's great. You love cricket. I love cricket, as you know. So there's something that we got in passion. I think American audience don't know anything about cricket. They're all into baseball. So it must get pretty frustrating for you not watching much cricket, live cricket, I should say, at least. In Australia, I get to go and watch the Ashes coming up shortly, and that's going to be amazing as well. So I can't wait for that. Okay, so engineering. You started engineering, and what was your first job straight out of university?
So I started with the Indian office of Olivetti. There was an Italian computer manufacturer, Olivetti, and I was working in their printer division. I was responsible for developing innovations around printing. At the time, we were going from dot matrix to laser printers, and I was in another small part of India where we were doing that. Didn't like it. And I just think that I, by then, had agency to say, I'm a reluctant engineer. I don't want to be an engineer anymore. Let's try something else. And by then I had moved to sales as my second job.
Right.
And I found myself interestingly in an area where I was doing engineering applications. Engineering document management was a thing at the time. I mean, it was very innovative kind of a business application. So I really started working at the application end of databases before I started working with the databases.
Fantastic. So you were selling the engineering product type from a application level and not really being in the database level. So you're really understanding the business requirements, the user, what they needed, and where the pain points were, which is, I think, is quite interesting, because normally when you start off at our age, you started off at the bottom doing the grunt work, and you didn't really understand. Like half the time you're going like, what are we actually doing this for? We don't really know, but you actually started the other way around. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's when I moved to the database side of it. And I started working with Oracle, had a couple of other databases that I worked with at the time. And one of the things that I realized very early on was that these databases are going to be more and more hard. There's going to be a lot more data. I'm talking about back in 1995, 96. Oracle was still like one of the early generation products, but it was becoming apparent that data was going to be everywhere. And progressively, I moved, like my personal passion moved more towards making data self-serve. There was enough innovation happening around the world. I was partnering with lots of companies from the US and Israel at the time, selling those products in India and developing solutions around those products in India. So Unidata, which was a fourth generation database at the time, they had their integrated applications. They were out of Massachusetts. There were a couple of database products out of Israel that were coming in and out of London, and we were integrating that for government of India. So I started a small business in India, and that's where I got my start.
Okay, fantastic. Let's pause there for a moment because you made a bit of a jump from, working on application down to the, reaching out to different technology providers in the UK and the US. And then you obviously said, hey, there's a great opportunity here to start something myself and actually kick on and create a little company. So what actually made that leap? Because a lot of people, when they talk to me is, I want to start an IT company. I want to start this IT services or a software company. What is that leap? And I explain to them is at some stage, you've got so many opportunities coming at you that you've just really got to make the jump, and you feel confident enough to do the jump. What made you that jump, and what set you up to do that jump?
I really think that in my case, it was a closer identification with a problem. Yeah. And the problem was that this data elements, there are these data assets that the company is creating, and we need to make that real. The company that I was working for at the time, which was Oracle, their focus was on building a better database. And we were sort of removed from that product-based decision-making. We were removed from that problem-based decision-making. And when I had the opportunity, I wanted to really get on the problem solution side, and that awareness of what that problem looked like from a client standpoint, and that ability that, I can solve that problem, that was the big shift. And again, I didn't have to solve that personally, knowing that I can bring the solution to them without having to invest a lot of time and energy in creating that solution. That was a big shift for me.
Okay, great. So you're understanding, and this is the thing we always talk about when you're talking to in our coaching program, Loading Growth, making sure people really understand the problem that they're trying to solve with the client. And I go back to people all the time because someone comes to me and says, I've got a great idea. I've got a great pitch. I want to start taking this to market. And I say, have you verified it? Yeah. Look, it's, we've spoken to 4 or 5 people in that industry, and guess what? It's a problem. And I go, well, that's fantastic. They rush off and they come back, a week or 2 later, and they go, well, it's not resonating. Well, I should say a couple of months later. And then I say, well, it is a problem. You've confirmed that. Now, how big of a problem is it for the client? And then they go, well, what do you mean by that? And I say to them, look, at the end of the day, the client's got 20 problems they're trying to solve continuously. If your problem is a problem and it's in the top 20, that's great. But if it's not in the top 3, the chances of them actually doing anything about it is very, very limited. So it's got to be a big enough problem for them to actually engage. So you've been learning this obviously for quite a while, Arvind. So you're learning about the problem, and you worked out the problem, and you're going, okay, I don't have to really technically solve the problem. I'll bring in suppliers all around to actually solve the problem, which is unique and great. So then you got that overwhelming feel that you can actually do this yourself, and you started your business. Is that what happened?
Exactly. And one of the things, obviously, being that coming from the business end of it, it also meant that I had to acquire a really critical, or a later part that became a critical skill. Yep. I had to acquire that really quickly, which is to build a team that can deliver to a solution. So as soon as I started, I had a couple of really good friends who were focused on the systems integration side of the house, and I was able to bring them together. So that was really the changing point. Was, not only can we conceptualize a solution, we can now integrate and then deliver a solution to the client.
Right. So then you straight into leveraging people, which is the next thing is really important. So you found the problem. You've got suppliers overseas that could actually supply the software, and then you go, I've got people that I can leverage to actually to drive this outcome for this client and solve this problem. That's really, really good, because leveraging is key. in any services, our people are, our product, as we always say, and we've got to leverage them correctly to get the right result. So that's pretty awesome. So you got the problem, you got the software, and you got the team. What happened next?
So next was an interesting point that you talked about or referenced. What would be a good story if it was not for failure? Yeah. So the challenge is identifying a right problem and truly articulating about the problem the right way. Right. Everybody needs a database. You could say, hey, all businesses need a database, but that's not the problem that you're looking to solve. So what we realized was that while we had good technology solutions, we were solving a problem that kind of later became a test for us. I think you already spoke to it. Is it a problem? Is it a problem big enough for the clients to want to spend the money on for? And what we realized was that it was a problem that the clients were facing, but it was not one of those immediate problems, or it was not one of those problems that the clients trusted a new company to be able to solve. So we had to go through that cycle where, after having even developed it a couple of times, this is like late 90s in India, we didn't have much financial ecosystem. We realized that we couldn't, the amount of capital required to keep that business running could not be produced internally by organic sales.
For sure.
So that's around the time when we started looking for, or when really we got options and choices to look for opportunities in the US.
Yeah, great. So it's just really important that, because I know India is firing at the moment. The economy is going gangbusters, and everyone talks about how amazing it's going. And obviously, the maturity of that economy is maturing. Okay,
Absolutely.
so people in those businesses are maturing, and the life cycle. And you obviously do analytics. I've did analytics as well, so we've got something else to share in common. And I realized when I started my IT services business back in 2005 that people still weren't really understanding what analytics was, and we had to educate them quite a bit in Australia. And we found we could win work in the US every now and then a lot easier than it was in Australia, because the market was more mature as such.
Exactly.
The business community was more mature, so they recognized the problems. And when we educated them, our education and their problem just aligned a lot easier. So
Exactly.
so the maturity is what drove you to the business maturity. Probably what drove you to the US.
Exactly.
And that's what happened. So when was that roughly about, Arvind?
8. So quite a while now. And at the time, obviously the best way is to find the footing in the marketplace, understand the market. And I was working for a couple of companies, mainly focused on, again, the same thing. There was a lot of outsourced services happening in the US.
Yeah.
And around 2003 is when we started what became the first version of our current company.
Yes. Okay. Just before we go there, the company has 2 names. Could you explain a bit about that?
Yeah. So I started working because I had a background in Oracle space. So I started working for a company that was at the time focused on Oracle applications, financials, services around Oracle financials application manufacturing, but it was primarily a services company. And then another company that I worked for was mainly a CRM focused company, again, a services company. Sort of pre-sales-ish role in both companies, where it was pre-sales or the sales engineer, like technical sales kind of a role in both companies.
Okay, fantastic. So you're building up more skills as you're going along. Okay?
Exactly.
You've started a business. You had some really good opportunity. The market wasn't good for where you were at. You moved countries. You started different roles. You've learned how to do technical pre-sales, by the sounds of things, and a bit of sales. Seeing
Exactly.
people in action doing things. So you're learning the whole time what's good and what's not good as well. And when you start your own business, you have a background of what, in your mind, what it should look like. So that's an awesome stage, because people come to me and say, Ian, when's the right time to start a business? Well, there's really no right time, but if you don't have some of those skills, it's going to be a little bit harder to actually achieve. You've got to hire people in with the right skills, expensive and everything else. So you've grown those skills out. And then the name of your company, your current company, is broken up into 2 different names. Do you remember what that is? I read on your website.
Sure. So Visvero came from, back in the day, business intelligence used to be like sold as, in the enterprises, this creates one vision of truth or one version of truth. So Visvero became Vis for vision, and Vero is Latin for truth. So Visvero was the one vision or one version of truth across the enterprises.
I love that, because when I first engaged you a while back, I realized that was it, and I never ever asked you, and I always had it in the back of my mind to ask you. And then I went onto your LinkedIn profile, and I was like, "Oh, that's what it stands for." I was right.
Yeah.
So that pretty awesome. So let's talk about the business that you're in at the moment. Where are you located? Obviously in the US, Pittsburgh, but
We are in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is sort of a cross between a Midwest and an East Coast business culture here in the US. Pittsburgh used to be steel capital of the world a few years back. So Rust Belt, a lot of manufacturing happening here. So I kind of gravitated towards that just from a business standpoint. Manufacturing challenges are more tangible. The value is more tangible to demonstrate. Like you can count things you produce and you can like you have more measure. So as an analytics company, it became a natural fit that we be in an area where those problems are immediately visible and magnified.
yeah, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. And what type of work are you doing at the moment? What's your services at the moment?
So we've kind of had an extension of the services. Think about our work as this journey of data in an enterprise. So we started out with data integration, where I would call myself like we're the plumbers for data. The
Yeah.
idea was companies have multiple tools, multiple ways of collecting information about their business. And what is important for them is to be able to see this all together. So we became the integrators of the data. The next part of the next evolution or an extension of that business then became, now that we're integrating this data, where do we store it? How do we store it? And then, as in another extension, how do we use this data? So we became this integration, storage, and usage company. Up until about 7 or 8 years back, the final use case was analytics, which was core to our heart, which is making data tell its story. So we were focused on that. Now that we have this complete visibility of the data, how
Yeah.
do we arrange it in a way that a layperson can look at it and get a story behind the data? Over the last 7 or 8 years, that use case now has extended to not only do I now know what the story is, I want to be able to act on that story, which is where the AI and this agentic AI kind of fits in that continuum of that data journey. So right now, our business, if I had to say it, is that analytics and agentic part of the data utilization.
100%, because people still don't realize to this day, and obviously we do, because back in my background as well, is if you don't have the right quality of data and the right sets of data, you can't run AI at the end of the day.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there's, I think, one of the big reasons why AI projects around the globe are failing is because you've got to really understand what the data is. And people really don't understand data until they spend the time and effort, and you have to have an SME or a subject matter expert to really know what that data set is and who owns that data and who owns the other set of data that all makes one record. They could have three owners who own one
Exactly.
record of data, and people just don't understand that. What do you mean, Ian? There could be three owners that own that one record. And when you
Yeah.
break it up and you show them that, they go, wow, who owns that piece of data and who's going to maintain it? Who's going to clean it? And who's going to look after that data? And there's a cost associated to that. So people just don't really get that
Yeah.
level of detail. So pretty interesting to see how this wave with AI goes over the next couple of years, and people don't understand it, because data governance solutions, I was a big advocate for it back in 2007, 2008. Data governance solutions, and no one except for big large enterprise would want to pay for data governance, and that comes to the core of everything: analytics, reporting, AI.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But people just do not see the value in investing in that. But maybe now they will with AI. If they don't invest in that, they might end up doing some data governance. Anyway, so that's just my passion to see if that part of the puzzle gets solved by.
Exactly.
Interesting. It's interesting that when I talk to clients, everyone is obviously in AI at the moment. Everyone's got a bit of an AI theme in their services or their software and pushing that as hard as possible, because there's a lot of hype around that. And what's the consensus where you are in Pittsburgh and in the US around what clients are expecting from you now around AI versus what you can deliver? Is there a disconnect with that?
I think ChatGPT, which is probably the most commonly known and most visible form of AI, this question answer engagement, I think people recognize that as an interesting use case. But enterprises, to your point, enterprises have to realize that, and more and more of them do it every day, is that data element, especially when you talk about AI truly being able to execute processes autonomously and being able to do more of those processes continuously. The data has to be accurate. It's not longer enough for the data to be almost right. You have to have a higher degree of trust than you've ever had in past in order for those processes to execute and in order for those workflows to kick in and be able to drive the benefit that an organization is looking to do. I think people expect all AI to be this question answer. They expect to be able to type in or speak to this all-knowing machine, and that gives them the answers miraculously. I think the bigger value and the bigger challenge is going to be in finding those organization use cases and sometimes making those hard choices about, do I put a person here or can I replace that with an AI agent to be able to execute workflows? Communities have to make those decisions together. There has to be a broader consensus and an agreement on what to do with now available resources, available human capital, and where to focus that. But that's what we see happening here in the US, definitely here in Pittsburgh.
Sure, fantastic. That's great insight there. All right, so now we know what you are rolling out and working with. Do you have any certain technologies that you favor at the moment, or are you just open to any technology vendor out there that you support with your services?
So we work a lot with some open source toolkits. For example, N8N, Crew AI, there's Kogo.ai out of India that we work with a lot. Our focus right now is in helping companies create these standalone AI in a box kind of a solution.
Yes.
So being that security is still an unknown, and obviously a lot of cyber attacks are happening and they will continue to happen, there's a greater emphasis on standing up workflows that can be executed with a limited range of data and at a limited expense. If you are talking about specialized use cases like we are with the clients, we understand that the data set is contained. For
Yep.
example, it's not this unlimited data set that, for example, an OpenAI needs to analyze for its LLM. You're working within a limited data set. So we can get away with localized on-prem, on cloud prem, or private cloud language models. And that's what we're developing and delivering for our clients right now.
For sure. So you're downloading the LMM models onto your environment, and then
Exactly.
they stay and contained, and they're not going back out to the world, which I think is a great,
Exactly.
very
Exactly.
good move there, Arvind. And I think that's the way a lot of companies want to have. They just don't want to be open, because really, if you think about this, most companies, their IP and their methodology and how they do things is really their differentiator. It's everything.
Exactly.
So I think when people don't really realize, it's a product, we build this great product. Yeah, it's good, but it's all that stuff to get to that building a product is a really important thing. And if you get that information out into the world, what advantage do we have? We don't.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I think that whole use case of keeping that data on a hosted solution out from the World Wide Web, I think is the way to go. So that's awesome. All right, let's move on to sort of like the business growth at the moment, where you're at the moment with your team, and let's just talk about the business itself. How big are you roughly at the moment, just size wise?
So in the US, we are about 80 people. I think it fluctuates between 75 and 80, given
Size team.
from quarter to quarter. But broadly, it's about 80 people on an average. And most of the folks are based out here in the US for us, even though we have a small development center out of India, which we started many years back, and we kind of continue to use that. We partner with some academic institutions over in India to
Yeah.
help refine our thinking about research that's coming out in this area
Nice.
as well.
Very clever, very clever. So yeah, that's a great idea, because it gives you so much more clout when you have someone written a paper or giving you some ideas around certain concepts or algorithms, whatever you're trying to pitch and deliver. So that's really, really clever, because to keep those people in house is just too difficult. You know what I mean? At that cost.
Exactly.
To keep those
Exactly.
expertise, keep them. That's a really good idea. I've got another client that is on a couple of advisory boards at a couple of universities and does the same thing. He taps into that sort of next level of thinking, where a lot of other consultancy firms are just too busy at doing that. So just trying to win work and deliver. Really clever idea. That's really good. So that's awesome. You got a decent sized team. That's and it's a lot of people bring a lot of problems, as you know. So let's talk about some problems. The team culture. Do you have a focus on what you want the company to be, really, from a culture perspective?
I honestly think that in a consulting company, that's a challenge that we have. We have fairly well documented and established practices about how we would deliver our services.
Yeah.
So that part is not that part. We expect less variability, or if there is a variance, it's easier to spot, because it's a simple, where did we deviate from whatever our established practices were. The challenge as an organization that we continue to deal with is this blending the human element, the growth element of individuals with the client goals, with the goals of the client. So in an organization like ours, which is very project and project success oriented, we don't want to leave our consultants behind, or get left behind by our consultants. What that means is, our consultants and our clients are both working on the cutting edge of technology. So what's very important for us is to recognize where that ship is going to, where that ball is going to, and then position ourselves for that. To borrow a cricketing metaphor or a baseball metaphor, is to know where the ball is going to be so that the fielder can be there. So that's where we often struggle with it, to admit it truthfully.
Yeah, look, it is a hard thing.
It's a constant journey for us to be able to collect, and on a monthly, weekly, quarterly basis, collect all those diverse viewpoints, to be able to analyze it, create something meaningful from a way of direction and adjustment from it, and then to present it to the team and get everybody to come along with us on that journey. So that's an area that we work very hard to accomplish that. I don't think we are there yet, but it's one of those things that we work continuously on.
Yeah, it's very hard. I mean, and it is always changing.
Exactly.
Because it's the economic impact with clients puts you under stress if there's less work, or if there's too much work, puts stress on the staff to try and deliver that work.
Exactly.
Because there's competing, there's always this competing, of what's, resources out there and projects
Exactly.
winning and how you're going to deliver it. And consulting world is a stressful world. So hence, I always ask this question around team culture, because it's so hard to actually get.
Exactly.
It'll never, ever change. It'll be one of the focuses. As long as you guys are thinking about that all the time when you do your QBRs or your quarterly business reviews or your yearly strategies, how do we actually tap into that extra energy that we have in our company and that culture? The other thing with innovation, what do you guys, I mean, it sounds like you are, you tapped into those universities and in India to get extra thinking, and that's part of the innovation piece. How do you think about innovation as in a company? Do you have a little team or 3 or 4 go-to guys that are your innovators? How do you actually look at that, Arvind?
So 2 things. I mean, as you can imagine, the innovation in our kind of a business comes a lot from knowing and being very close to the client problems. So it's very important for us that people who are delivering the solutions and who are sort of creating these solutions or mini solutions on a daily basis, we kind of collect that and create a centralized knowledge base that we can dig into and create some innovations around it. Methodologies that we have adopted is, in our compensation program, we created a program called Delta Dollars. And what that meant was, people are actually getting rewarded for sharing either the problems or the solutions or both, like whatever they come up with. And then a group of people will continually work towards solving for those problems, or will create a more systematic solutions approach. And individuals who contribute to this, it's an important element of our work, of our field consultants' work, that a part of the compensation is tied to it, and they get rewarded for being able to contribute, and that's why the name delta dollars for it, because they do contribute to it. And then we take these problems or we take these solutions, and either internally or along with our academic partners, we create productized solutions to make it work for them.
Brilliant, brilliant. So you working with clients that come up with some, difficult requirements or some use cases that are very difficult to achieve. And you, with innovation, you're solving those problems. You look at those problems and you take those problems back, that logic back to the mothership, back to your office.
Exactly.
And you sit there with the team going, you know what, that's a really good problem we solved there with that innovation, with that new technology or that process. We should actually strengthen that. We should actually put some governance around that, and we should take it as an offer, wrap that offering up, and then we should take that to market. Very, very clever. And you wrap out it all around with the delta dollars, which I really like that. So really, really smart move there, Arvind, because people try and do two things. They try and build innovation or products or services, by themselves, and then they take them to the client, and that's quite difficult because you never know what the client really wants.
Right.
Until you actually there, or you work with clients, and then you take that knowledge and that thought process, and you bring that and you build that solution. So that's really, really clever. The same thing I always say, to make sure you get 2-3 customers, maybe cost or break even, build a solution on site with them, make sure the IP is your IP. And then once you built it 3 times, you only then really work out how to actually technically build it. But also, number 2, is it actually solving a big enough problem? And then you see that in action, then go and build your own stack and own solution, because otherwise you build something, you don't really know if the fit's right, and you spend a lot of money and burn a lot of effort around that. So brilliant idea around the delta dollars. Congratulations on that. Now, teams bring conflict because there's a lot of people. Do you have any processes or any tips or tricks around how to solve conflict within team members?
So a few years back, the source of conflict, and we had a few instances around this, and largely I think it comes from lack of clarity of the roles, or significant enough overlap, and not enough empowerment, or not enough clarity. A few years back, we adopted Executive Operating System, or EOS, as our business operating model. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I know very well. I've got some books in the back shelf. I've been through every methodology out there. Vern Harnish, EOS, there's tons of them. Anyway, carry on.
So we have, it has obviously various benefits of getting the team on board and making sure that everybody is aligned. For us, the biggest value, we had a consultant come in and talk to us about it, and it was really a more structured method of meeting and being able to align our operations. And what that meant was there were very clearly defined roles and responsibilities, which I'm sure most companies do, but there were very clearly allocated failure points to it. So it's one of those things that we talk about in our company, that success has many fathers and failure is an orphan child.
For sure.
In our world, we kind of allocated the failure responsibilities and success responsibilities to individuals. And honestly, I think culturally, being that we're not a very large company, being that everybody knows everybody like one-on-one basis, for us it also meant being a little bit more acceptable of the failures, making failures not, hey, my God, somebody's going to lose a job. I mean, we're not that big. So making it okay for people to admit to failures was a big thing for us in terms of resolving the conflict. Like, people, we don't seek out failures, but when it does happen, and inevitably every now and then it will happen, we have made that environment where people will not be afraid to admit it and take responsibility for it.
Great.
And I think that has been a big thing for us to eliminate conflict, reduce conflict as a team.
Really good point. I mean, it's when you have 2 individuals or in a process, and there's something that's a gap in between that process or those people, that's, well, it's a 50-50 call. Is that your activity that needs to finish that, or is it my activity, in that workload? Or I'm too busy now, today or the next 3 days, so I don't know if it's really my role to do that piece. I won't do it. But before I was doing it, and that gray area then causes conflict, because something will fall through the gaps, and then basically who's picking that up. And then when you're all running hard in the business, you see something falling down, you go, oh damn, I've got to pick that up, and got to spend time and, whose problem is it? So I think, really good point to take away there from Arvind is, the roles, responsibilities, crystal clear, and they never are, there's always gaps in those roles and responsibilities.
Yeah.
So to be flexible to help each other pick those up as a team and bring them forward together and solve them as a team. So that definitely helps with the conflict. And I think it's really, really good. So that's really, really nice. We talked about the services. Where do you think the opportunity is for a consultancy firm like yours going forward over the next 2 to 3 years? I mean, do you think it's more productized services or the standalone AI solutions you got to build out for clients? Or
I think, broad areas aside, like obviously AI agents, there's a lot of opportunity. I think there's a lot of opportunity in cybersecurity. But that aside, like taking those broad areas aside, I think consulting companies have to realize, to your point earlier, and when you were consulting with us, you were very forceful in kind of making sure that we understand it, is consulting companies survive because of micro problems that they solve, right? Large consulting companies such as an IBM, such as a Deloitte, that micro problem can be the entire spectrum of a solution because they have the bandwidth. But smaller consulting companies survive and thrive by identifying those micro problems, gaps between the solutions that they can make their revenue on. Our company is doing the same thing. And I think inevitably, regardless of what companies are using, there will be those areas that will not be covered by a traditional solution. And that's where consulting companies have to become true SMEs, have to become true advisors to be able to tell the clients and create those solutions that can address those micro problems. And I think that's where the biggest value is. For us, it's like, for example, for us, it's areas like in that supply chain continuum where the clients are using variable demand softwares, whether the clients are using SAP. It's like this transportation element is not getting taken care of. This compensation or management of the fleet that the organization has, that's not getting addressed in the traditional solutions. And creating those workflows, creating those boxed up solutions that can integrate, I think, is a big opening for all companies. For us, the big value is in creating integration points from traditional softwares like small, medium size. Of course, everybody has connectors into an Oracle, into an SAP, but there's also a lot of smaller mm, ERP or accounting applications, Sage Mass solutions, Microsoft Dynamics solutions that are not as widespread and as such do not have that many connectors for the clients. That's where we see a lot of value. We see a lot of value in becoming development partners with QuickBooks here in the US,
yeah,
and enhancing the solutions for our clients. And again, consultants are problem solvers. We I don't know, I'm sure there are consulting companies that are adequately funded and that have got the adequate resources to want to become another IBM, to want to become another Deloitte. And there might be a few that will be able to accomplish that. For smaller consulting companies like ours, 100, people in size, we have to focus on a problem at a time. And
yeah,
that's where I think the big opportunity is to be able to get closer to the problem and get even more granular with the problem that we solve and
yeah.
become an expert in that area.
Very good, Dave. The point that you brought up, and I always say to people, you got to be closer to the problem to solve it. And recently, I flew overseas from Sydney to Manila to work with one of my clients who's got a team there that supports his offshore team that supports his local team here in Australia. And I was there for the Saturday to run these workshops. And then on the Sunday, I got invited to a big tech event in Manila, and I met the ICT director for the whole of Philippines. And suddenly I was on stage presenting in front of like 4,000 people. But anyway, long story cut it short, I ended up having a discussion with 3 big BPOs. Now, for those people listening on the conversation, the way I describe a business process in outsourcing company is very different from a IT services company like an Indian. Generally, they have BPOs as well, but they are generally outsourcing technology partners. They're very, very different skill sets. BPOs are doing administrative tasks, call centers. There's a whole lot of things that they do around that state. And obviously they've got tech as well, but that's where the industry is. And basically I was having a discussion over lunch, and then I got into a bit of a workshop to help 3 big BPOs out. And one of the things that dawned on me, of which I'm always on this side of the fence, even though I have a team in Philippines myself, and I even had a team in India back in my consulting days, is they aren't closer to the problem. They aren't close enough to the problem. Okay.
Exactly.
And I really realized, I could not believe it, but the penny dropped. And I was asking a whole lot of a series of questions, and they couldn't really answer the questions properly. Okay.
Exactly.
And they just went to me, and I just said to them, you're not close enough to the problem. You've got to get on a plane. You've got to go to your clients in the US, and you've got to sit there, and you've got to actually start to be integrated into them way of thinking, and also understand what problems you're really solving, and are they big enough? And
Exactly.
at the time, they are just too far removed from that. And then they have this client, oh, we can do this with AI now, or we can do this with this, or whatever it is, and basic automation, and then just dropping resources when they feel like it. So it'd be interesting to see, how these companies overseas that don't have a strong partnership or people localized, when AI comes along, and automation, because automation's, I think automation's been going for a while, as we know, but it's going to be enhanced much more with AI. And that's going to supercharge the change that we're going to go through over the next 2 to 3 years. So it'll be interesting to see how the BPO type companies in Philippines handle it. Do you have any insight that from Indian outsourcing, like TCS's, Wipro's, the big guys, obviously, they've got teams obviously in the US, but how are the Indian offshore companies dealing with that don't have a big prevalence onshore? Are they
So
battling at the moment?
I think they will have some challenges. I think the good thing that has happened is, because Indian IT industry is broadly matured, it has been in the business for a long time. There's a lot of shared learning that has happened by the way of cross pollination of this knowledge across that industry spectrum. Bigger companies have spawned smaller companies, and they have cross pollinated a bunch of industries. So the resources is not a problem. What is problem is that smaller companies for a while have also relied a lot on not having a US presence, but just like relying on marketing, relying on this remote based development support.
Yeah.
Right. And many companies have done well when that was technology work being done over in India. The challenge that they will have is, to your point, if they do not, simple things, if they do not understand the impact of why is the November end to December a big shopping time here in the US. E-commerce. What does it mean for there to be a weather change in the US, and what does it mean that it's 1 o'clock in East Coast and it's like 10 a.m. in the West Coast? So even those small things, which you would know, but you would not really know. I mean, you might academically know there's a 3 hour difference in between East and West Coast, but what does it mean from a business standpoint? And what challenges does it cause? Like even those smaller things, and not being aware of those causes a big change in the business. And I think that's where I think that a lot of businesses, for example, in India, are allocating resources or are creating these new partnerships where it's more of a where it's not a supplier vendor relationship, where it's becoming a true partnership. Like, how do we make sure that this knowledge is truly shared, but not just knowledge shared, knowledge understood and assimilated in the same way between these two partners, as opposed to, do you have any software development project? I can do this for a fraction of a cost in India. I don't think that's valuable anymore to either of the two parties. With AI based coding and all of those other tools in early stages as it is right now, companies are realizing that the bigger value is in everybody becoming closer to the client and solving the problem one client at a time.
Yeah, good
That
point. Good.
mass customization kind of a solution is what we're driving towards.
Very interesting. And not that we get into any politics, but what's happened with the visa situation now with the tech companies? Has that impacted bringing people onshore to the US now with HB1 visas and all that stuff? Is that happening or
Yes,
not happening?
I mean the short answer is yes,
Okay.
and I think um, both sides of the story are partially true. I mean, like with everything else, both sides are half right about this. I think the the visa situation has meant that there is fewer of those people available.
Mhm.
Um, but the problem has never really been. The problem has been that the technology people have not been available. The bigger problem is that US is a very spread out kind of a country, right? it's not like it's not like some other countries where you could say people should be able to change jobs, people should be able to move from one place to another. Like I said, east coast to west coast, north to south, it's a very different culture. The challenge has been to have this workforce that is mobile, that's able to move from north to south, that's able to move from west to east, east to west. And that's the gap that having an immigrant workforce or having an international workforce was able to fulfill. Because to a person coming from India, China, Philippines, or elsewhere in the world, once they make the move from that country, wherever they were from, much like me, for example, when I moved from India, the gap that I fill is not only not having the technical resource available, the gap that I fill is being able to go to a project in New York and LA in the period of 6 months. And that's what will be impacted. Hopefully, what we will see is that there will be a rationalization of workforce. There will be a rationalization of how the work is getting done. And I think also American businesses were in a way spoiled by having this mobile workforce available with them. It made us lazy in a way that we were not allocating as much time to training resources. We were not allocating as much time to developing technical talent. And I think it'll force managers like myself and like some of my other managers in other client organizations to say, hey, we cannot take this workforce availability for granted. And we will have to have a strategy for developing our own technically skilled workforce like we would for some of our other functions. And I think in the end, I think it'll make US businesses definitely much stronger. And I think it'll make some of our international partners much stronger as well.
Yeah, very interesting. See, because I'm not in it, I've never
Exactly.
actually had that spin on that, and that's really interesting. Look, that's amazing. This is the question is when I started consulting. Gosh, when was that? Long time ago, back in 98 or something. Yeah, 98, 99. I was at Deloitte in the UK, and I would be working with my colleagues in the US. And they would only find out on a Sunday afternoon, like at 4 or 5 o'clock. You got to be on this site tomorrow, get on a plane. The plane's been booked, and you're flying at, 6 o'clock in the morning,
Exactly.
to go to from one place, the side of the country to the other side of the country. And they just, normally they would know for the longer term projects, like a SAP project or something like that we were doing. But sometimes they were quite short, So like I would speak to the guy on Thursday afternoon or Friday and he'd go, yeah, and I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to be tomorrow, like as a Monday.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? Because in London, where I was based, you could always get around where, 3/4 of the work was happening. It was always London.
Exactly.
So you didn't have to get on planes. And every now and then I did go to Europe to fly for work. So that was sort of our like equivalent to the US is, get on a plane, you fly to, I used to go to Dusseldorf quite a bit for Bayer Pharmaceuticals project,
Right.
and you go back and forth. But really interesting to hear that migrant workforce, which is so true, is no longer going to be that flexible as such
Exactly.
going forward. And you have to invest in people, localized people. I think that's really, really going to be interesting. And it'll be interesting to see if when the new administration takes over, whenever that is, in 3.5 years' time, whatever, if that changes or that comes back, or will
Yeah.
people be happy with the current status around those visas? Do you think that the slack that's going to be, there might be some slack that sort of happens on in the Indian big tech teams? Do you think they will actually drop prices as well to sustain their models, sustain the people? Because getting rid of people, as you know, if they don't need them, is really expensive. Do they actually try and, is it a race to the bottom? You think that'll happen with pricing? Or do you think they'll invest? I'm talking about the big, like the TCSs, Wipros and Infosys and all those big guys. What do you think the challenges around that?
See, I think because a lot of these companies are public companies, I don't think the market will not reward them dropping prices. The profitability measures are sort of at this point a holy cow, so to speak, in that context. And I think the prices that over the years, companies like Wipro, Infosys, TCS, they have been dropping the prices to what the market can support and can sustain. Their cost structures also have grown significantly for them to want to drive the cost down anymore. So truly the best way for them is to look for non-salary costs that can be reduced. And what that would come in by the way of is more leverage. I think that's one area where larger companies will want to be able to allocate like more junior level people to senior level people ratio. That might change, and that will impact the quality of the finished product as well. And companies of that scale have been relying on clients, sort of have been able to deliver each individual at a higher level. So
Yeah.
that leverage will change the quality of people that will be available, and that's where they can drive the costs down. There's also non-salary costs that these companies have adopted that'll come down. Some of the layoffs have already been announced in India and other places. I think the collective demand increase overall in the US will mean that the volume of the work will not suffer. There will be a natural attrition. The rate of attrition might increase, but it will be a natural attrition just because of the business not being viable anymore. We've seen this happen in past. Like as the profitability suffers, a lot of non-serious players or non-long-term players will find it more effective to get out of business than to stay in the business and drive the cost down.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Now, vibe coding.
Yeah.
That's so it's quite interesting because I have an ongoing joke with a couple of developers and how fast is it growing, and I saw even Google's Studio AI Studio, whatever they call it, came out like a week ago. And I went and watched a couple of YouTube videos and that, and I was like, wow, it's pretty interesting. Now, those are like very small mock-ups of products that actually you take to market quite easily, and they're small applications. Nothing that you and I really talk about taking things to large enterprise or enterprise. It's not really enterprise grade yet, but I'm sure it will get there at some stage. And
Absolutely.
the big tech companies are pushing that because that's an opportunity to lock them into their vibe coding ecosystem, if you want to call it that way.
Mhm.
What's your thoughts on that? And are your team using Claude Code and things like that to help speed up projects at the moment?
Everybody is using some level of AI assisted code right now. It hasn't had an impact of reducing the number of people
Yep.
on our team. And I think largely that's because of the nature of the work that we do. I see some of the applications that we see, clients that are, or companies that are using, let's say, web applications, developing the user interfaces of the applications. Some of that, I'm actually impressed with how rapidly that vibe coding domain has progressed. It will take a little while to get to the enterprise grade, but it's also impressive about how rapidly that has progressed. What that would mean is that the nature of the individual nature of the developers engaging in vibe coding, that will change. We will have to be more of code inspectors, validators, value creators in the code rather than these syntax gurus. So that's where I think the developers will need to improve. I think the quality of logic will improve and will get enhanced. But like with everything else, like faster, better machines have
Sure.
meant that developers didn't have to worry about constraints at some point, right? People
Yeah, definitely.
stopped worrying about, oh, my memory utilization is high. Oh, just throw more memory at it,
Yeah.
right? I think with vibe coding, we'll see some of that happening where the developers will, if anything, have to become better developers. Will have to add value to the code. The logic will have to be more effectively thought out. And
Mm,
and I think overall it'll become an integrated part of the development life cycle, as it
that's
should.
right.
I think the testing is more or less
Mm.
getting delegated to automated or agent based testing anyway. I think it'll just be that backwards integration of that workflow.
100%. It is really interesting. I know some SaaS founders have built products or rebuild products on Repeatlet and Lovable and things like that, and it's quite amazing what they are doing with that. And the way I look at it when I'm working with clients or coaches, you got to have, you might have a vibe coding person, but you need a vibe engineer. Basically, someone to
Exactly.
go through and make sure the structure's right, make sure everything's working correctly, and then you've got the security layer, a whole lot of things that obviously you've got to still really put a lot of effort around, because you're not building the software and you don't exactly know where the issue is, and at a certain point, because you didn't build it yourself. So there will be some new workflows, and I think, as you said, the change of that workflow process will be interesting to see how that maps out.
True.
As you build those products out. But I believe, and I saw a report actually 2 days ago from the US saying that people around sort of AI solutions actually aren't really getting reduced, besides the tech companies. I'm talking about end user clients, is because they're finding more roles or better roles for people to do once AI has been deployed. Now, I don't know if that's going to be long term the way that the world goes. If you can make someone 20% more efficient, does that mean that person can do something else in that organization? And that's going to be the thing interesting. That's really going to be interesting. And I'm talking about the end user side. And the challenge with consultancy firms is they are always on the edge of learning new tech, new innovation, and everything else. That they will continuously learn and adapt quicker than an end
Sure.
user side, because the end user client, as you know, they're hard to change, and they're like a ship, and once they get going in one direction, it takes a year or two to change them over. So I don't know if that change will happen much, but I think the consultancy teams will be able to deliver better products, I think, over the next year or two for those problems quicker and faster and easier and less stress on consultants, and just get
Yeah.
more and more work coming through. Because remember, we talked about early on the 20 ideas and the company only can do 3. Well, maybe
Exactly.
now those 3 can be done quicker and faster, and then you've got the 17 left over to do more.
Exactly.
So I think you can solve more problems quicker and faster with clients in the future, and that'll actually just speed up more projects being delivered for clients. Doesn't mean the workload's going to go down.
And hopefully in the US, we will have the work-life balance that you guys in Australia have already.
I don't think it's ever going to be possible, Arvind. Many years ago, when I was in the UK and decided to come to Australia, and one of my colleagues at the time, when it was a global company I worked for, he said, "Oh, you should come to the US because I've been there a few times for work." And I go, "No, it's just too hard. I don't know if I can survive, long term." But I think maybe with COVID, it changed the work pattern
It
in
did.
the US. People weren't on planes all day long. That's
It changed the
definitely,
thinking about work.
yeah.
The work centricity that was almost like a virtue in the US workplace. I think it made people think about that differently. It didn't make them work less, but I think at least it forced them to look at it and examine and be more mindful of the rightful place of work and the rest of the life,
Yeah.
as opposed to this almost chasing this gladiator approach to work.
Sure. And I think it sort of starts with sales, because
Yeah,
the guy goes in, "I want to solve this problem. How much cost? Just jam it in," and he gets the delivery team to come and solve it. You know what I mean?
exactly.
And the delivery team arrived day one on the project, and, "Oh, did we actually sign up for this?
Yeah.
This is like hard to deliver." It's like we're going to have to be working 60-hour weeks to deliver this project. So I think that also has got to change. It all
Absolutely.
starts with clients, as I always say. And if salespeople can sort of sell in the project closer, aligned with the delivery team, then basically that also takes the pressure off them. But I think that whole reset of why we're on this planet, why we're here as human beings, has definitely happened with the COVID. I'm going to be interested now with AI. Is that going to help that even more so and get away from that gladiator approach? As you said, I think it's a hell of important. Last question. If someone was going to start an IT services business or a software business, doesn't matter what it would be, with your hell of a lot of experience that you've had, the good things and the bad things have happened in the where you are now on top of the world, what would you pass on to those people if they were trying to start a business today? Any key 1 or 2 things that you would say, "Hey, you've got to do this, you've got to do that"? What's your thoughts on that?
I would almost say what you said to me when we started talking about this, Ian. Focus on the problem. I think far too often we focus on our skill set and we say, "Oh, I can do this, I can do that, I can make more money, I can be a network engineer." I think redefine it in terms of what are the problems that I'm looking to solve? And identify clearly if it's a solopreneur or a small business looking to start. I think it's vital to look for and examine those problems deeply and continuously be grounded in the area of solving problems. I would also encourage people to not skimp on marketing. I think that's marketing, and I'm guilty of this as much as the next person is. Marketing is like, if we do well, we spend a lot more on sales than we do on marketing because it's more visible. Like you can say, I can see a salesperson sitting there making 40 phone calls, and this is productive use of my dollars. I think you can get much further by more effective marketing. So I would say getting closer to the problem, defining that problem, and continuously redefining that problem all the time. That would be my item number one. Focus on the product would be that, defining the problem. And secondary is take advantage of marketing. And I can tell you, marketing is the least expensive sales resource that you can get. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And I think that's where companies are guilty, because people often think in terms of, hey, this LinkedIn post, it's going to cost me $500 to write it, and then it's going to be a problem. And the key thing to keep in mind is, if you get one lead every 10 posts, that is less than half the salesperson that you're having, right? So I think marketing is the least expensive sales resource. Just because it's not visible, just because you cannot see it work, people gravitate more towards the sales as opposed to marketing.
Look, it's interesting you say that, because I had a client we spoke to a while back for the Philippines team, and PJ spoke to them, and they didn't want to go ahead with the marketing. And when we boiled it down, I caught up with the guys and I said, "What's the story with the marketing? I thought you were really keen on it." And then we went through that. They just didn't want to take responsibility on what actually are they solving with the client. So the ICP, I call it the perfect future client. What does it really look like? What is the problem they're solving? And they just trying to be they feel like they want to be more generic.
Yeah.
And they don't know what they're really solving properly. So therefore they can't market to it, if that makes sense. So the challenge wasn't around the marketing and the funds to spend on it, is they just didn't know what they were selling really. They weren't crystal clear on that piece up front. So the only thing I could say to people out there is basically solve the problem. If you can solve the problem, make sure that you can get in your mind what the message has got to be to those people that you want to sell to in the future. And once you've got the clarity, then you've got to test it, A/B test it, and then you've got to market it.
I agree. And there's only like a mental satisfaction that comes from saying everybody is my customer, right? I mean, the message that, I think I'm almost using that exact words that you said to me: when everybody is your customer, nobody is your customer.
That's right. That's right. You don't own the customer. So in the old days, when I go, big software companies, that's our customer. Yeah. You physically do not own that customer. You might have software there, but that is not your customer. Exactly. It's not. Only if they're paying you that month are they your customer. You know what I mean? Let's get reality. Let's have a reality check here. All these big software vendors, that's our customer. You can't go there. No, I can go there. I might be a partner of yours, but it means nothing. It's crazy how people, actually think they own something when they don't really own something, and they've got to actually make sure that, got a system. One last thing I didn't ask you is, and I should have actually in my notes had it there, how much of your percentage of your revenue is services, pure project services, versus sort of like a managed services or a retainer or a recurring income of some sorts?
I think right now, so the way we define our project services and managed services is if we have the full responsibility of a solution versus if the client has a full response. So if you're talking about like a client model, it's done for you versus do-it-yourself model. I think do-it-yourself, which is sort of us providing the resources and the clients the work, that would be about 20-25% of our work, between 20 and 25%. And the remaining is mostly managed services that we're delivering.
Thanks very much for having on IT Mastermind Talks. I really appreciate the awesome session with you, Arvind, and I can't wait to catch up with you later on. Cheers.
Bye. Thank you so much for having me, Ian. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on IT Mastermind Talks. Don't miss out on our next episode. Hit the follow button and stay updated. Want to be our next podcast guest? Contact us and share your expertise with our audience. Visit www.itmastermindtalks.com for more information.